Hello, and welcome to Wait, I Am Black, a podcast about the moments when race stops being abstract and starts to matter. My name is Michael, and today I am joined by Grace Mosuro. Grace, thank you very, very much for agreeing to have this conversation with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. How are you? How are you feeling about doing this
I'm good. I'm
today?
good. I think it's always interesting to think back and reflect, so I'm excited.
Fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that. Very happy to have you on. I reached out to you because, as I told you, my wife sent me a post by you on LinkedIn, a post that I thought was really powerful about your experience on a flight. I feel like we should probably start a little bit with that before we delve into what we're going to be talking about, the main thing we're going to be talking about today. You were on a flight and you were flying first class, and all of a sudden, you weren't supposed to be,
Mm.
according to someone.
Yeah. So just to give some context, I run an inclusion consultancy. So my day-to-day work is about helping organizations to create more inclusive spaces. And I was visiting a friend in Saudi because I'd been working really hard. I thought I'm going to go and visit my friend, but I'm also going to treat myself.
Yep.
So what I traditionally do is I will usually buy a premium ticket, and then when I get to the airport, I'll ask if they have any upgrades available and I'll pay at the airport for the upgrade. But this time I had bought a business class ticket because the prices were reasonable. And then when I got to the airport, I said, "Do you have any first class upgrades available?" And they did. I paid the difference at the airport and went through to the gate. When I got to the gate, I was behind a family. It was a white man, his wife, and his two children, his two young children. They were ahead of me. And because it's always a rush when they announce group A or group one, group two, group three, and
Yeah.
anyone just gets up. So this guy
I always find that really funny
really
because, like,
frustrating
wait,
as well.
they're not going to leave you behind if you're the last person
Exactly.
seated.
Exactly. You're there, right? You're at the gate. Be patient. But anyway, this guy was ahead of me. So the um the person at the gate, before he even showed her his boarding pass or before he even said hello, she said, "This way to first class, please, sir." And he started laughing and he said, "I love that you think I'm in first class, but I'm actually in economy." And she was like, "Oh, this
First class
way,
people must
sir."
have a look. Mm,
Yeah, exactly. So she was like,
yeah.
"This way, sir. Apologies." And they laughed. And then before I even got there, I laughed in my head because I thought, let me see if this happens to me,
Hmm.
already knowing it wouldn't. I had my boarding pass out. She again didn't look at the pass. But she immediately directed me to economy. She said, "This way." And so I stood there with my pass out. I didn't say anything. I just stood there with my pass out. She looked at me again and she said, "This way." So I stood there just holding my pass. So I'm not saying a word because your
Wow.
job is to look at the pass to
Yes.
understand where someone's meant to go. So by the third time she was about to say it, I think she's now either thinking this woman is crazy, she can't hear me, or
Doesn't
she's
speak
just
English.
yeah, something. So she now looks at the pass and she sees that it says first class and she says, "Oh, this way." She doesn't apologize. She doesn't laugh with me.
Oh boy.
Nothing. So I laughed.
Yeah, of
I
course.
laughed and I went about my business. But in my head, I thought, this is how crazy bias shows up.
Okay.
But the fact that somebody else assumes that because of the color of our skin, we're not meant to be in first class
Mm.
or business class is insane.
Oh,
So that was the experience,
wow.
essentially.
Well, one consistency with that person is not looking at the boarding parts or the papers that you had with you, because she didn't look at the paper of the other man that went
Yeah.
before you either. So clearly, that's a consistency. But that consistency what is inconsistent is not being able to identify what a person that flies, who flies first class looks like,
Yeah, I
or
think
shouldn't at all, things that shouldn't be
definitely.
applied.
I think the fact that it was so clear that for her, white meant first, black meant, economy. Like that
Mm.
it was so blatantly off. Like I couldn't have even, when you like people will put together a movie or a script and you write it. I couldn't have even written
It's a
how
cliche, isn't it?
just
It's
cliche it was. Like,
yeah,
wow, this is crazy to me, but also really evident of the fact that there's still so much work to be done
yeah,
around biases and inclusion, but also how people address biases when they show up. Because in that
mm,
situation, she could have handled it really differently. She could
yeah,
have been really humble. She could have
yeah,
apologized.
mm,
She could have just been human. And she chose to be ignorant from
yeah.
start to finish. And I think for me, that's why I shared the story, because many people don't understand the lived experience of Black people, like what we
Absolutely.
experience on a day to day. And I tried to use my LinkedIn platform as a storytelling platform to give people those
Yeah.
insights. So yeah, fun
Wow.
times.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I saw that a lot of people found it very helpful
Mm.
and very powerful as well when you shared it. So yeah, you've already said a bit about what you do, but let's reverse a little bit. And who is Grace Mosuro?
So I am a Nigerian born, UK raised mum of an amazing, or mum to an amazing teenager.
Oh,
And she's my absolute world. And essentially I started my inclusion consultancy because I was born in Nigeria in a place where being Black was the norm. And you know, I didn't know that I was Black necessarily
mm,
until I came to the UK.
yeah.
So, understanding the differences in culture. When I left my house in Clapham Common in London growing up, once I left the house, I was in Britain. But once I was in the house, I was back in Nigeria. It was the traditional greetings. It was
Yeah.
the, you don't look at your parents when they speak to you, you look at the floor. It was the kneel down to greet your parents. It was yes, ma. It was all the things. And then leaving the house, it was a completely different experience. When people spoke to you, they expected you to look at them in their eyes. They called other people, called like young people, called adults by their first name. It was crazy stuff as far as I'm concerned. There's a massive culture clash. And that really impacted my experience in education as well as in the world of work. And that as well as kind of learning of a number of crazy things that happen across the world to Black people,
Yeah.
my own experience of discrimination and microaggressions in the workplace and in society. And then my journey through breast cancer in 2021 was the
Oh wow.
reason that I started my consultancy, because I have lived experience of intersectionality that many organizations still don't understand what that is, and also how it impacts the trajectory of people in organizations. So I really wanted to come into this space to support organizations to develop that understanding, but also to give people with that lived experience a voice in their businesses and to help them to really stand in their power. So that's why I do what I do.
That's really powerful stuff. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so let's go to before race became a thing for you, right? And I know you've already said a little bit about growing up when blackness meant color of your skin, full stop, and nothing more. What was growing up like for you?
Yeah, so my first 5 years in this on this planet were in Nigeria. So there wasn't even we didn't even call each other Black.
Yeah,
So I didn't know. Well, firstly, I didn't speak English, so we wouldn't have said Black, we would have
interesting.
said Dudu. But I didn't, we didn't say that to each other because we all
Yeah,
look the same.
yeah.
So those 5 years, I didn't even register that I had a skin color. It was just, this is how I look. And
We're
then
from the same place.
Yes.
as Yorubas, right?
Yeah.
And Dudu, the moment you said Dudu, right? And I try to go back to growing up as well. You know what came to my mind? You remember? I don't know if you know about that soap. There was this soap
Yeah.
that was black.
Oh, Shedudu. Yeah.
Oh, shit, Dudu, thank you very much. That's what immediately came to my mind because if you say black, skin color will just never ever come to our minds.
Exactly.
All right, please go.
Yeah. And then I moved to the UK, and it's interesting because I grew up in Clapham Common. So when I moved to London, we moved to Clapham Common. Within the first 2 years, I started going to a primary school there. And most of the people that I went to school with were black, but they were black Caribbean. So again, blackness wasn't a thing. What
Yeah.
was a thing was the fact that I was African. So I was teased about being African. I was called African boo boo. I was called
Okay.
all sorts of crazy things. People took the mickey out of my accent, but it was also really confusing because they looked like me. So I didn't understand why they were taking the mickey out of me. I always say that when I was growing up, it wasn't cool to be African.
Yeah.
But now it's really cool to be African. Everybody's listening to Afro beats. Everybody
Afrobeats.
wants an African name,
Mm-hmm.
all these things. And I love where we are today, but that wasn't my experience
Yeah.
growing up. At my blackness, or, kind of what this world identifies me as, only really came to be something that I was aware of when I was 18. The
Wow.
secondary school that I went to, it was predominantly white, but my teachers were amazing. And one thing I love about that school, I went to the Greycoats Hospital in Victoria. Whoop, whoop. One of the things that I love about that school is that as long as you were a child who tried and who had ability,
Yeah.
they pushed you, irrespective of what you looked like. So I was really blessed
Awesome.
in that way. Most of my teachers were white. But most of them had a really soft spot for me because I was the girl that was a little bit cheeky, but never kind of crossed the line, because the line meant they would phone my mum and then it's chaos. So
You don't want that.
at
Being
all.
from an African family, Nigerian
So
especially.
calling my mum from work, absolutely not. So they knew there were limits to what I would and could do. So they were really, really good to me. And then when I was 18, I went to Liverpool for the first time to visit my boyfriend at the time. And I went out with some girls. We went out in the evening. We had a really nice time. We were a little bit tipsy. And as we were making our way home, this car drove past us and someone shouted out of the car the N-word at us.
Oh wow.
And I remember looking behind me to see who they were talking to. I was like, oh my gosh, who did they just say that to? Because I had never been called that word
Oh
before in my
wow.
life. And that was the day that I realized, wow, they were talking to me.
Wow.
And then I had another experience in Liverpool where I went to Carphone Warehouse
Okay.
and I was served by this white woman who was so rude, like so rude. She literally spoke to me like I was dirt on the bottom of her shoe. And I remember complaining about it to head office, and they sent me a £10 voucher.
Oh wow.
They didn't recognize the racism that I called out in the complaints letter. They didn't recognize the rudeness, any of it. And I remember that was the last time I ever gave Carphone Warehouse my money. But that's when I became aware that, wow, my black skin means that in some places, I am viewed as less than. I am viewed as someone that you can treat differently, you can treat poorly, and I'm viewed as someone that you can shout, derogatory statements to. So that's when I became aware of it, and that's why I still have like not such fond memories of Liverpool.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think the last time I went back was when my boyfriend graduated.
Wow.
And I'm 41 now, so that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I've not been back. I will go back one day, I'm sure, but there's nothing enticing me about going back to Liverpool.
Wow. What I like about these stories that you've told, as this first one especially fits this. I feel it's not something that is consequential. It's almost it's happened without an impact
It
that
had an
can,
impact, but it happened without me having, like, I didn't do anything for
yeah.
that to happen. Do you know what I mean? It's just someone decided it was their right to do that. And that's mind blowing to me.
So when you realize it was directed at you, how did it make you feel in that moment?
I was angry. I think what I was lucky about is that because I'm such a lightweight with alcohol, I was tipsy. And when I'm tipsy, I'm really happy. So if I was sober at the time, I probably would have been more upset than I was. But I was angry. But also, one of my friends who I was with, she's crazy. So she started chasing the car. So she's chasing the car. It's like, girl, you're not going to catch the car. But
And
also,
when you catch them, what are you going to do?
I was like, that's just, even if you catch them, what are you going to do? Like, what are we really doing?
Talk
But,
about road rage.
right. So I was grateful that when that happened, I was with people that I felt safe with. Even though
That's
we were
good.
just girls, there were 4 or 5 of us.
Yeah.
Um, a couple of the girls are like, I'm quite tall, but a couple of the girls are taller than me. You know, we could have defended ourselves to some extent if anything dangerous had
Yeah.
happened. So I'm glad I wasn't alone when that happened. But I remember just being confused for so long afterwards. Like, how how does this happen? I grew up in London. London is the most diverse city, obviously, in the UK. I'd been blessed never to have been called that, not to my face anyway, in London. So to be 18 and for that to happen was really, really shocking. Really shocking.
Yeah. Before that happened, what encounter have you had with race or racialization? You know, what did you? How present was race?
Um, if I'm honest, it wasn't very present for me growing up. Like my it was more present in my house. So my mom
Okay.
definitely her my mum was forever worried about getting deported. So she was always talking about the fact, we're black in this country, we're foreigners, you can't get in trouble. You have to just, shejeje, like,
Yeah.
just keep your head down, work really hard, this. She always talked about the sacrifice. I always saw my mum working 3 jobs. Um, I saw my mum sometimes being very humble in her interactions with white people. And that made me think, what is the difference here? Because when we're at home, you are the matriarch, you're the powerhouse, you're the superhero. But then
Yeah.
when we're around white people, you're submissive, like she was just very different. And I
Yeah.
think even though I couldn't call it out as, she's like that because of race, it was definitely something that I noticed. But my mum was very much about, the messaging was always, we're immigrants, we're black people, you have to work twice as hard. Da, da,
Yeah.
da, da. But she never explicitly told me because you're black, some people might treat you badly. And I think that's because she grew up in Nigeria. Again, not
Yes.
everyone was black. So she didn't even understand what racism looked like because she was experiencing it in real time with us.
Yeah.
So for her, it was an education too. Um, so yeah, it was interesting. Like I didn't grow up with it until I got out of my nucleus, which was went to Liverpool, which is quite a diverse place, but
Okay.
it is still a majority white area. Um, so yeah, I also think that because I lived a really sheltered life in the sense that my mum didn't really let us go out. we we weren't the streets, we weren't in the
Not
streets
news
running
at all.
around. None of that. Like we were at home most of the time.
Yeah.
And I remember our friends used to be playing outside and they'd shout up to our window, come out, come out. And I'd say, no, I don't want
You
to.
have no idea.
I don't feel like it. When really I wasn't allowed. I wasn't allowed. But I think some of that sheltering is probably why I didn't experience racism until I left London because I wasn't really allowed out very much. So
Yeah.
I was never in spaces where I potentially could fall victim to that. I went to school, I went home. I went to church, I went home. that was pretty much my life.
Yeah. This the fact that you went to a school where people were recognizing of or recognized ability and put that first and not race, and then you from a family where race is discussed but not emphasized as a factor for uh, shaping your experience outside of the
Mhm.
home. What did you think, or what how did you process what the factors for success were? What how did you see, what did you think would be more important for success?
So, based on my experience at school and also the way that my mum raised us, she raised us to work really, really hard. She raised us to carry ourselves. So, my family call like we refer to each, I don't because I'm younger, but like the elders refer to the younger
Sister or
ones
something.
as Omoba because
Oh,
we are
okay.
descendants of royalty. So
Ah,
growing up, my parents were, particularly my dad, really emphasized, you carry yourself in a certain way,
okay.
you're descended from royalty, you dress a certain way, you walk a certain way. And he really kind of built that in us. I just thought my dad called me a princess because he was calling me.
Yeah, you're his princess.
Yes. But then when I met more of my aunties and uncles and they kept saying it, I was like, why is everybody saying this? And
Mm,
then we have a Mosuro book, which is basically our family tree.
okay.
And it shares like the story of where the name came from and our
Mm,
legacy and all of that. And I was like, oh, I get it now. My uncle was like, yeah, like your dad wasn't just calling you a princess for nothing. So my dad was because obviously Mosuro is my dad's name. My dad was very big on know who you are, know like the power that you have, know the legacy, the giants whose shoulders you're standing on. So my
mm,
dad is the reason that I carry myself the way that I do. But what I got from my mom is work really hard. You're gonna have to work twice as hard as everybody else. I saw my mom working 3 jobs, that my mom did not rest.
wow.
So what I learned from my mom was that the need for hard work and that, the belief that hard work would be what leads to my success.
Mm,
But then when I got into the world and also in school as well, the school I went to was also a Christian school, it's Church of England. So
okay.
we went to church during school as well.
Yeah.
At the end of every assembly, we would sing a hymn, we'd say prayers,
Mm,
etc. And my school definitely lived those values. So they were very big on work hard. If you need help, we'll support you. As long as you show that you want to try, we will help you. And they definitely did that.
oh
So
wow.
throughout my childhood and my early teens, all I'd ever been fed was you're a princess and work really hard. And your work is what will, kind of propel you forward. And those were the messages that I got. And even in my church, my Sunday school teacher was this amazing white woman called Caroline. And she had a real soft spot for me. And she got me this book. It was an Amazing Grace book. And inside it, she signed it to Remy. So when I was younger, I went by my Yoruba name, which is Remy
Yeah.
Sola. And she said, to Remy, the girl who will never let anyone tell her what she can or can't
Oh
be.
wow.
And I was 8 when she wrote that for me. And I've still
Wow.
got it now.
It's
So that
powerful.
was that. Yeah, that was the messaging that I got from everyone that I closely interacted with up until the age of 18. So I went into my adult life thinking that my hard work is what's going to lead to my success. And it wasn't until I entered the world of work that I realized actually that's not true. Okay. You can
Oh
work
wow.
really hard, but visibility, perception, often discrimination or kind of the systemic inequalities that have been created. That race was created deliberately. It was a
Mm,
social construct that was created to keep black people at the bottom and white people at the top,
yeah.
and
Okay.
institutions were created off the back of that
Yeah.
premise and that theory. um and I definitely saw how that showed up in the world of work for me and my experiences.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about that because you've already spoken about um, being out with friends and being, shouted at, the N word. And that was a moment that did not change the course of your life. It
Mm.
was impactful in how it made you feel, but it didn't change the course of your life. It didn't have that kind of consequential uh, impact that can completely transform someone's trajectory. You've also spoken about the other experience that you've had, but when would you say that you began to realize that wait, race is not just going to be the color of my skin and longer. It's going to be something I'm going to be navigating, possibly for the rest of my life. What happened?
So what I will say is, even though that experience in Liverpool didn't like stop me from working hard, it definitely was, it felt like I've had a couple of them, but it felt like I was Eve eating the apple in the Garden of Eden. It woke me up from a dream I didn't even know I was living, because I'd never been called that word before. And the word hurts. It really hurts, especially when you know that they mean it to hurt you.
Yeah.
So that actually changed my whole view. I was
Oh
living in a
wow.
bubble. I was living a complete bubble where, I walked confidently. I never feared where I went.
Yeah.
I was never on high alert. That incident meant that every time I went to an area I wasn't familiar with, I was on high alert,
Oh wow.
because I was like, I don't know this area. I don't know what these people think of Black people. I don't know what could happen here. So that actually did impact the way that I showed up publicly,
Oh
because
wow. Okay.
it meant that I always had my guard up. I was always braced for something that could happen,
Oh wow.
so that I wasn't shocked like I was when that happened to me in Liverpool.
Okay. That clearly had much more impact than I understood
Yeah, for
previously.
sure, for sure.
So let's focus a bit more on that then. That so let's talk a bit more about what it did to you. How it made you, how you showed up differently after
Mm.
that, the spaces that you were in. What exactly, how exactly did it impact you? Why did it impact you in that way?
So it impacted me in that way because it was done in the dark of night, and it was done by someone who wanted to hurt our feelings, but then also didn't want to be held accountable. So they shouted it in the dark and drove away. Like they shouted it while their car was moving. But the impact that it had on us all for the rest of that night, how it changed the way that we walk on this earth, was really, really significant. And I think that for me, it really made me realize that actually I'm not safe everywhere, that because that word is, for me, it's a really violent word. Like it's worse than a swear word,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
and for me is very heavily loaded with the potential for violence.
Yeah.
So experiencing that meant that whenever I go anywhere now, I always have on just this preparedness about me, like I everywhere I go, particularly because, and I think COVID might have done this as well, but whenever I'm in a space where I am significantly the minority, if I see like loads of white people or people from different races, I will smile at them to see where they are, because that then shows me how I need to show up. So
Okay.
if they smile back, then I know I'm safe.
You're safe.
If
Yeah.
they don't smile back, then I'm on high alert, because I don't know if you're going to accidentally bump into me, or if you're going to suddenly hold your bag tighter because I'm walking past you,
Yeah.
or if you're going to follow me around the shop because of my skin color, or if you're going to shout profanities at me. I don't know. So that's actually how I show up now, is when I'm
Oh
in new
wow.
spaces that are unfamiliar, I will smile at people. And
Wow.
that helps me to understand if I'm safe.
I am so sorry for not realizing how significant that moment was.
No, is it?
Because, and I really should, because I'm not just apologizing for myself, apologizing for many people who, because they haven't had an experience, cannot really recognize the significance of such experiences. Because I haven't had someone shout that at me, the N word at me. And I feel like because of that, I couldn't get. I just saw it that, oh well, you know, uh, you what was that saying about sticks and thing can't, you know, can break my bones or something, but words can never hurt. I'm
Mm,
just, do you see what I'm saying? I'm taking it in that way, but
yeah.
clearly it is not,
Mm,
because the impact it's had on you is that it took away your innocence.
yeah.
It is your moment. It is, in fact, I was waiting for wrongly waiting for a bigger moment of, wait, I'm black. But that is as big as they come.
Yeah.
That is a
That's the core
huge,
memory for me.
that is a huge moment.
Mm.
And I feel it's a huge moment of learning for me, most definitely. And this is not the first time, because there's a second um, episode that I'm recording where someone's moment of realization is, in fact, being shouted at, you know, the N word being shouted at them. And I can see how I may have also not emphasized in that other episode what the significance of that moment. So
Mm.
that's why it's significant for me. Um, yeah, not many people will realize that. I feel many people will just think it's just a word,
Yeah.
but it's a word that's loaded. And I like the fact that you said that it's depicts violence for you. It's a violent word. Um, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I just think even when I think about what happened at the BAFTAs a few weeks back to Michael Jordan and Delroy Lindo,
Yeah,
and loads of people talking about, you know, they were calling Black people that were complaining about it, they were calling them ableist because they had a problem with the fact that the person that shouted it had Tourette's and this, that, and the other. But what they didn't give us grace for, or I didn't feel like there was enough recognition for, is the trauma that sits behind that word for us. When that word has historically been used, where that word came from, the fact that that word was used to basically view us as cattle, as
yeah.
animals, to
Slash the
hang us,
humans. Yeah,
to hang us on trees, to rape us, to do all sorts of things to us, right? And the fact that we carry that with us, that legacy of slavery, the legacy of the violence of that word, and what it permitted people that used it to do to us, I think is like my biggest message to anyone listening to this who isn't Black and maybe doesn't understand the significance of that word, is that it to me is violence, because I know of the violence that happened to people that were called that as slaves, right?
yeah.
And so when I hear it today, it's not just a casual word. I don't even say it myself as a Black person. I don't like it when I hear other Black people say it. I understand that they, you know, some Black people say it, especially in rap, they say it almost as a reclamation of it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we're taking the
But we
power.
understand why people say it. Yes,
Yeah, but
exactly.
even for me, I personally don't use it because I don't like it. And I just think it gives people, it gives room for people stupid conversations about, well, if you can say it, why can't I say it? Let's none of us say it. I don't like it. I don't like it. But I appreciate that some Black people feel like it's our word now and
We've
you know
reclaimed
we
it.
can
Yeah,
use it. But
yeah.
for me, having that said to me by someone who is not Black, and even if someone who was Black called me that, which they never have, if they call me that, I would challenge them. But hearing someone who's not Black say that word for me is violence. And it also, for me, it braces me for violence, because I don't know if you are bold enough to say that to me, I don't know what else you're capable of. So yeah, it does it evokes the fight or flight response in me for sure.
Yeah, I can see why, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that BAFTA situation is one that's really key. It's a moment of learning. It was a moment of learning for many people, and for me, the circumstances around it is really not the focus. It's the impact. And I
Definitely.
think we often make that mistake of not focusing on the impact and trying to focus on the trying to rationalize. For some people trying to rationalize, for some people trying to ascribe intentions for
Yeah,
on various things. Well, what we should be focused on is the impact, and the
definitely.
reality is that there's impact that's born out of history and everything that you've talked about. So that's really powerful. Thank you very much for taking us there. One thing that you talked about earlier is the institutional systemic impact of your racialization. That's when systems, when things begin to hold you back. In some cases, it will be to actually platform you to help you forward. But in most cases, for most racialized and minoritized people, it's limiting.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about that. When that moment your bubble burst from a my skills, my ability, my the content of my character is going to take me forward. Let's talk about that moment. Can you take me there?
Yeah, so I I started my career in recruitment. I had an amazing time at this company called Michael Page. It was wonderful, but it was just working too many hours. I was there for about a year and a half, and I was like, I haven't seen anybody that I love in a year and a half. So I left and I went into welfare to work. And I was working really hard in various organizations within the welfare to work space. But I was always hitting a wall when I went for a promotion.
Okay.
There was always, oh, but you're really good at this job. You know, we think you should stay doing this job. So I was never given an opportunity. And in order to be promoted, I would basically have to leave an organization in order to take a job that was higher up. So that happened a number of times. And I remember on one particular occasion, I had an experience where I was applying for a director role in an organization that I joined when it was a startup. And when it reached around 200 people, they started to recruit a middle level, kind of a senior leadership team to sit under the C suite because they needed basically more people to manage the staff. They were recruiting directors. I was the only Black person that entered the recruitment process. I applied for two opportunities. None of my colleagues applied for those two opportunities. All of the roles that my colleagues applied for, my colleagues were white women, they all got those jobs. The two roles that I applied for, I interviewed really well. The feedback was, you were fantastic, you could do the job, our clients love you, our people love you, but we're going to open this process up externally just to make sure we're getting the right person. That didn't happen to any of the other roles that my colleagues
Oh
went.
wow.
And long story short, while they were doing that, I challenged them and I said, can I ask why this is being done only to the roles that I've gone for and it didn't happen to any of the other roles? And they basically dismissed my challenge and said, because I said, I feel like I'm being treated differently. And I was gaslit. I was told, how could you say such a thing? That's not true, blah, blah, blah. And then they ended up giving the job to two externals, a white
Oh
man and a
wow.
white woman. And that to me was when I realized that I can be outperforming other people. I can be someone that is loved in the organization, someone that is great with clients, someone that is ticking all of the boxes in terms of being effective in my role and still be overlooked because my face doesn't fit. And I was told a few months later by someone who sat on the recruitment panel that the reason that I didn't get either of those jobs was because one of the C-suite had said, I don't think her face fits.
Oh wow.
And I felt that, but I was shut down and told, that's absolutely not true, blah, blah, blah. But then I came to find out that it was true, even though I knew it was. Um, and that's when I really woke up to the fact that, wow, the way that I look can be someone's reason for me not progressing in my career. And I think I look fine. But because of my skin color, you have decided that I do not deserve a promotion, that I do not deserve a salary increase, that my daughter does not deserve potentially a better future because of the color of my skin. So that was the moment for me in my career where I realized that, wow, race really is an issue in the workplace for many, many people.
Wow. Um, what did you do? How did you look to navigate that?
So I um basically those people got the jobs. It didn't change anything. But then a few months later, George Floyd was murdered. And it was during lockdown. George Floyd was murdered. And I reached out to my CEO because they had said nothing about it for weeks. And even though there weren't many Black people in the organization, there were some of us in the organization. We were friends with people in the organization, so they knew how we were feeling. They were subsequently feeling bad because we were feeling bad. So I spoke to the CEO. I said, your people are hurting and you're not saying anything about this. And his response was, I didn't think we needed to say anything. I thought it'd be obvious that we thought what happened was horrible and that racism is wrong. I said, it's not obvious. And actually, your silence can make us believe that you think it's not a big deal. And because of that, we set up a EDI task force in the organization. We started to have listening sessions where Black people would share their lived experiences. I talked about the fact that if I'm wearing a tracksuit on the weekend and I go into a supermarket or Boots, it's highly likely I will be followed around by security, irrespective of the fact that I am a high earner. Because of the way that I look, I potentially will still be followed around. If I walk past an old white lady on the street and it's just the two of us, it is a regular occurrence where she will snatch her handbag really close as I walk or cross over. And sharing those experiences really illustrated to me how much those conversations are necessary, but also how little people understand and appreciate about the lived experience of Black people, even when they say, I have Black friends. And after one of those listening sessions, my CEO actually called me and said, Grace, I want to apologize for what happened to you with the recruitment process because I get it now.
Oh wow.
And it
Okay.
was amazing that he apologized because he was quite a proud man. It was amazing that he apologized, but it didn't change my experience and it didn't
Of
change the
course.
fact that those jobs weren't available anymore.
Yeah.
It didn't change the fact that it potentially could then take another few years for me to get a promotion. It didn't change any of that. It also didn't change the impact. I didn't get a salary increase. I didn't get the opportunity. And then that was one of the reasons why I started to work in EDI was after my experience with those director roles, then George Floyd passing and the way the organization handled that. And then when I had breast cancer, I then had a similar experience again at the organization. I was seconded at the time into a partnerships director role. I was working on a joint venture for the organization. So I was working under an interim CEO. And the plan for everyone that had been seconded was that as soon as it's time to recruit these roles permanently, everyone that's in the seconded roles would get those opportunities. I happened to be diagnosed while this was happening, but I was working full time whilst going through chemotherapy, surgery, all of that. I was working full time. I didn't take any time off during my chemo. And my CEO, like my actual CEO, not the interim, called me one day and he said, Grace, when are you going to take some time off? And I said, I'm not taking time off until my role is made permanent because I don't think there's anyone in the organization to advocate for me while I'm out. And he said, okay. They then started to recruit the permanent roles or to give people the permanent roles. And one of my colleagues, a white lady, contacted me and she said, Grace, they've made me permanent. Have they made you permanent? And I said, no. So I reached out to the interim CEO and I said, hey, great news that so-and-so's got her permanent role. I just wanted to find out when I would hear about mine. And his response was, you will need to apply for the role and interview for it. and we'll be opening it up to external candidates.
Oh,
My
wow.
immediate question was, why wasn't that her
Yeah.
experience, my white colleague?
Yeah.
And he said, I'm not going to discuss that with you. And he knew I was working really hard. I built the relationships. I was the reason that we'd won one of the contracts that we'd won. He knew all the hard work that I was doing. And he knew I was getting chemotherapy on a Friday, sleeping all weekend and logging on Monday and working hard. And he still said that to me. I emailed my actual CEO and told him what happened. I said, I'm really exhausted. This is what he said. And he called me immediately and he said, Grace, I'm really sorry. Leave it with me. Within an hour, I got a request on Teams from the interim CEO saying, can I speak to you? I said, yes. He called me. He said, I'm really sorry. You misunderstood what I meant. You don't have to interview. The job's yours. You'll have the contract within a week. How do you
Okay.
misunderstand that? I didn't misunderstand anything. You tried to take the mickey. You
Yeah.
tried to treat me differently. And only because I advocated for
Yeah.
myself was the situation changed. So again, to me, what that really emphasized is that when people are holding biases, sometimes humanity is forgotten completely. Is that, I was working extremely hard despite what I was going through with my health. I was still performing, and that was still my lived experience. And that, without a doubt, was one of the major catalysts for me starting my business when it
Oh,
became
wow.
time to do it. Is like, it's just never ending. Never.
Never ending. That's. I'm sorry to hear. You've said you've talked about this twice now about the health situation that you dealt with successfully, I might add. So I'm really grateful. Very very pleased to hear that. But you're vocal about it, and I'm really glad to see
Yes.
you being very vocal about it. So that is what you're talking about is the intersection of your race and then health, your health situation, and the result of that. Wow, it's crazy that you've had almost similar, identical events happening to you within a short space of time. But what it did obviously led you to start your own thing. But that last point you made, I want to dwell a little bit on that. You sounded like it was exhausting. And I know I've this is a common theme, and I want us to dwell a little bit on that. How? How so?
It's exhausting because it is never ending. I spoke to a client recently. We were talking about some work that I'm doing with their organization. And she said that she really doesn't like the term journey because for Black and brown people, this isn't a journey. This is our lives. Like, we are on this road forever because we will always come across people who hold certain beliefs, irrespective of how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
And it's also exhausting because I am the optimal, like, optimist. I'm to the point where people are sick of me because I'm like, I believe in people. We have the capacity for greatness and doing great things and being good people and all of this. And irrespective of how I'm treated, I still carry that view. I'm also a believer. So for me, like, God goes before me with everything. And I truly believe that he will make a way where there seems to be no way. So I'm always, believing for better and believing for more. But in that situation, this, like the latter situation that I talked about, I was physically exhausted as well. Like, anyone that's ever gone through chemotherapy, it is a toxic drug that kills cells in your body, healthy and sick cells. So I was literally like a shell of myself in terms of energy, but I was still showing up. I'd be on calls sometimes on a Friday. No, on the Monday. If I joined a call by Monday afternoon, I'm flagging. So I'm quiet or not anymore, not so much. But at the time, I was very quiet on the calls, but I was still present. I was taking notes. I was adding where I needed to. But my colleagues knew that I was going through chemotherapy. And once or twice, they'd say, Grace, we're pretty much wrapped up. We'll send you anything else. Go and rest. So people knew what I was going through. And I didn't know anyone that was going through chemo and working. Like, because chemo is so hard on the body,
Yeah.
people usually take that time off.
Yeah.
That
I
wasn't a
know that.
luxury that I felt that I had. And that's
Yeah.
also why I do this work, because so many Black women in particular, we talk about the fact that Black women are the most highly impacted by burnout in the workplace for this exact reason. Even when their bodies are demanding rest, they don't feel like they can rest because they don't have people that advocate for them. They don't feel safe in their organization. They feel like they need to work twice as hard. They don't think that they should log off at 5:30 when their contract says they can. And it's things like that that I think is just so important for people to continue to be educated on, because it's real. It's really real. And I genuinely believe that that's part of the reason that I went through the journey that I did, because I was that woman. You know, I was working ridiculous hours. I was responding to every email, no matter what time it came through. I was going above and beyond trying to prove myself.
Yeah.
And I think what the experiences also highlighted to me, you talked at the beginning about that sometimes our race can platform us when it comes to positive action, for
Yeah.
example. But my experience and the experience of many Black people is that positive action can only take you so far. Because once it comes to director level roles, that's where we start to see the lack of diversity in those levels. So we are allowed to progress up to a certain point, and then anything after that is tough, really, really tough. And for me to experience that twice really brought to life that, wow, you know, I'm only going to be allowed to get to this certain point in my career.
Yeah.
And then everything else, there's your face doesn't fit proposition that is thrown out.
Wow.
And I really wanted to affect change in that space, which is why I do what I do now.
Well, these realizations definitely took a lot away from you. In the periods that you've described so far, right, or as a result of the events that you've described, have you found yourself modifying your behavior in any way to try and fit with what you've now realized is the reality of your racialization by other people?
No, I'm really blessed that I run my own business, so I work for myself. So I don't have to deal with daily microaggressions or performing to fit in necessarily. What I have found, though, is that the majority of my clients identify as people from marginalized backgrounds.
Okay.
And I'm still, you know, I'm really blessed to work with some amazing people, but the majority of the people that engage me through LinkedIn and you know, other things like that
Yeah.
are from minoritized backgrounds. And that is because they understand the lived experience of Black and brown people, and they believe in the work that I'm doing in that way. Like, they genuinely, someone said to me a while ago, if you live it, you can't leave it. And I think that's why most of the referrals that I get are from people that are Black or brown, because they live it. And they really want someone who's lived it too and gets it to come in and help their organizations. And I continue to do this work. I think what would be good and what I'm hoping to see more of is more people that don't identify as being Black or brown, but still really want to do this real work, engaging me and saying, actually, we get that you've had the lived experience and you've got the academic and professional experience that we need to really push this work forward. Like, that's really what I'm working towards now.
No, that's awesome. Thank you very, very much for trusting me and the listeners with your stories. They're really powerful to hear. And but before we close, and we are at that point now, I want to ask you a question. What do you wish people understood about the moments that you've had what should people know about these? We've already proven, moments that to many people will look small, will look inconsequential, but we know they are consequential.
Yeah, what I would say is that you never know what people are truly going through. And I think that just because people show up as happy and engaging and loving doesn't mean that they haven't experienced trauma, or they aren't working through trauma, or they haven't overcome trauma. And I think it's really important to have conversations, to listen to podcasts like this, to really understand the lived experience of people, but also to think about, like, I do this work because I have a 14-year-old daughter whose life I'm responsible for. So I want to make sure that the world that I leave her in when God eventually calls me home is a world that is better than the one that I entered. That's the legacy that I want to leave, and that's the impact that I want to have. So I really invite people who maybe don't have lived experience of racism or discrimination because they aren't Black or brown, or they aren't from a minoritized background, is to
Yeah.
think about, with the power and the privilege that I have, what impact and what legacy can I leave? And it doesn't have to be huge. Like, it could be smiling when someone who isn't the same race as you smiles at you, because especially after the race riots in August, that was one of my LinkedIn posts, is if you see someone who is Black or brown smiling at you, from today onwards, smile back if you are safe, because that is the indication for us right now that we are safe. And, so that could be the impact that you have on someone. It's just smiling back. Or you could be someone who is speaking about other people in rooms that they're not in. You could be someone that is platforming somebody for an opportunity. You could be someone that is challenging that their face doesn't fit and saying, actually, it does. And I want that person in this team, because when that experience happened to me, if more people had spoke against that comment, my entire life would be very different. So that's what I'd say to anyone listening.
Oh wow, thank you very much. That's really good. I like this. Smile. Smile back at a racialized person smiling at you, because they just might be trying to diagnose their space, to see whether, to define how their own existence within that space
Mm-hmm.
should be. I think that's really key. And even though people shouldn't have to do that, racialized people never should have to get into a space and need to be thinking about, how they should fit or otherwise within that space. But the reality is that that's what happens. And so it's really good to hear you say that so well. Well, again, thank you very much for joining me, Grace. Really, really enjoyed our conversation. And to those listening, as you sit with Grace's story, I invite you to think about this. Is there something, anything at all, perhaps completely unrelated to race, that you didn't used to account for, but which has quietly started to shape how you are seen or how you were treated? And what, if anything, has that shifted for you?